Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good afternoon to everyone, to our panelists and the viewers. Welcome to Hashim Sani's Center for Palestine Studies, jointly organizing this webinar with BDS Malaysia. And today we are going to discuss corporate complicity in the genocide in Gaza, and what the reflections by our panelists. And to discuss this, as mentioned just now, we have four panelists who are very familiar with the issue of Palestine, and as well as on the issue of corporate complicity. We have Cikgu Azmi, who is the chairman of MAPIM, Professor Awaluddin from IKRAM, is also in charge of the Palestinian Center of Excellence. We have Saudara Tian Chua, who is, I will introduce him later, even though he's very familiar with most of you, and also Professor, Associate Professor Dr. Peter Slizak, all the way from Sydney. Now, we know we are witnessing at the moment a terrible genocide still going on in Gaza. More than 58,000 people have been killed, minimum. There may be people say that maybe tens of thousands more who are buried under the rubble. So we are not sure exactly how many. Most of them are children and women, innocent people who are being killed. And the world is still not doing anything about it. We know that the United Nations has special rapporteurs on the human rights issue in occupied Palestinian territories. They have all the way from 2008, I think the first one was Professor Richard Falk, and then followed by Makaram Wibisono from Indonesia, who resigned after 2 years because he was not given access to go to occupied Palestinian territories. After that, it was the UN appointed Professor Michael Link from Canada, spent 6 years. And he also wrote a report, just like the report written by Professor Richard Falk, very damning report describing the situation in the occupied territories as apartheid. And still the world didn't do anything about it. And now we have Francesca Albanese from Italy, who has written extensive report about what's happening, and also the first one probably to describe the situation in Gaza as genocide. And more importantly, what she did was to produce a very extensive report about corporate complicity, how companies around the world are helping Israel to commit the genocide in Gaza by supplying weapons and other forms of assistance to Israel, financial, technological, etc., etc. And she is calling the world basically to do something about it. Based on the recent speech she said at a conference in Colombia yesterday, Bogota, she said that minimum countries should suspend relations with Israel and also ask the companies in their country to stop having any business links with Israel. That's what she's calling the world. And she's very brave. Of course, we know that as a result of her bravery, she's now being sanctioned by the United States government. Probably the first of special rapporteur have been treated this way. But to discuss this issue further, we will be asking our panelists to comment on the situation in Gaza, as well as the situation of companies still helping Israel to commit these atrocities, this terrible genocide in Gaza. And I want to start first with Saudara Tian Chua, who is a ex-politician. I would say he's not involved. He is still a politician, I suppose, but not associated with any political party at the moment. even though he was previously the vice president of PKR, who is now in government. But he has been involved in the Palestine issue for many, many years now, and helping us also be as Malaysia to organize events here in KL. Without further ado, Sarah Tan Chua, what's your reflection? Why is it that this the situation of companies helping the genocide and the atrocities committed by Israel, this has been going on for so long, decades, and nobody actually was very serious to talk about it, to say that this has got to stop, except for what we recently, fortunately, Francesca Albanese commenting on it and calling really loud to governments and companies to stop doing this. So, Tanchua, can you?
Yeah, I think we must give credit and also congratulations to Francisca Albanese. She produced a very bold and comprehensive reports and analyzing the situation. I think to quote her, she actually said that what happened now, you have a corporate culture as well as the vested interest government evolving from the economy of occupation into a new phenomenon she called it economy of genocide. I think this is to show the transition, and also in the way also a moral imperative, because earlier is a economy of occupation. Throughout years or decades of economy of occupation, it has developed extensive network of economic interests where government, corporation, they all get together and assisting this settler colonial apartheid system to continue. And before we were able to effectively sanction, just like what we did to South Africa, they have now become much more escalated into economy of genocides. I think this is where I think the calling we have to understand now. The economy of genocides is immoral and also very critical, and people are dying in a much faster rate. And then she has interest very comprehensively list down who are the complicit. And if you look through it, it is covering a large part of our global economy. And that's where their power is. You know, we talk about Google, you talk about HP, you talk about BlackRock. These are global companies that have extensive tentacle to going around the world. And you can see there are two parts of it. One is the American as a country now, as a superpower. They have no qualm to show their intimidation, their imperialist power. Then they have the economic power to use this, partly intimidate, secondly also entice people to be part of it. So I think this is why I think it is more important now for the global civil society and to urge our respective government to look at this report seriously and to discuss and accepting some of their recommendation as our response. And I cannot help but to stress again, this is a moral imperative where we are now living in the era of economy of genocides, and nobody that participate in this global economy can escape our ethical and moral responsibility to stop this economy of genocide.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tan Chua. I don't want to elaborate more. I want to invite our next panelist, Associate Professor Dr. Peter Slizak, all the way from Sydney, who is Jewish, by the way. He's Jewish and also very much involved in the struggle for freedom for Palestine. Dr. Peter Slizak, go ahead. What's your comment on the situation of this tragic situation of companies? Scores of companies in the list that Albani said cited, more than 50 are involved in helping Israel to commit genocide. Why is this tragic situation continuing until today? Peter Slizak, go ahead.
Well, it's. I agree with everything that was just said before. Of course, this is a serious moral outrage for all of us. And the phrase I also underlined in Francesca Albanese's report is the economy of genocide. In that context, the first thing that occurs to me is that, of course, this is not new. I mean, really, if I had to point to the underlying problem, these corporations are part of the capitalist economy. And that has always been really at the heart of these crimes. I mean, you could probably look at every single war and atrocity where they were basically underpinned by corporations that were profiting from it. This is not unique. I mean, if you think of America's criminal involvements in Vietnam, in Iraq, everywhere around the world. So really, we're facing not exactly a new situation. It's just much more vivid now because it's being streamed live and the horror is much more visible. But, you know, I mean, I'm thinking of the crimes in East Timor. So the first point to make is that this is capitalism. But that doesn't exactly answer the question of what can we do. And I think the only answer that seems correct is what's going on, but it's too little and too slow. The popular uprising around the world, the boycott movement, for which Malaysia has a very proud record, in the end, these are the forces that can counter the strong governmental and corporate interests that are driving this. In the end, the governments and corporations can be held to account by the public outrage. I think there's good examples of, I mean, South Africa, in the end, again, after a very long time, other crimes that were comparable were in the end forced to account. I mean, war crimes trials, for example, in the United States, after the Iraq War, the former United States Attorney General, Ramsey Clark, he held a war crimes tribunal and put on trial George Bush Sr., Norman Schwarzkopf, the general, and Dick Cheney, one of the Pentagon advisors. Now, that was late, but this was a way of accounting for what were the serious crimes. In fact, they were found guilty of the Nuremberg-style crimes for which we hanged, I mean, Germans after the Second World War. This is always after the fact and a bit late, so it's not exactly answering the question what to do. But it's very hard to see what else besides popular resistance and the exposure. There are some good signs. Just yesterday, the New York Times, for the first time, published a very strong piece, I think using the title Never Again, by a Jewish scholar, pointing to the extent of this atrocity and genocide. These are signs that perhaps the world's conscience is now being stirred, and hopefully populations can rise up. I have to say, in Australia, it's typical. It's not just the corporations, it's the complicity of the government. The government is up to its neck in supporting these crimes. In our case, indirectly, Australia is trying to hide the fact that we are involved in exporting components of the jet bombers. And so popular resistance is starting to grow. And frankly, I can't think of any other alternative, because that's what's always turned the tide in crises, as one can imagine, in South Africa, in East Timor, even in the Vietnam War. So perhaps that's the only sign of optimism that there are some changes.
Yeah, we will discuss what can be done afterward. We can discuss more about this afterward, the second round. At the moment, we want to reflect on how the situation has been going on for so long, for so many decades, and why did the world not do anything about it for so long? So our next panelist, can I invite Professor Awaludin? Unmute yourself, please. Unmute your microphone. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Professor Awaludin, by the way, is sorry. So before that, let me introduce you again. He is representing Ikram, formerly a lecturer, professor of engineering at University of Technology Malaysia, now heading Palestinian Center of Excellence, an organization, sub-organization of Ikram. Go ahead, Professor Awaludin.
Okay, let me perhaps mirror and give a bit more context to what Professor Slezak has mentioned just now. To answer the question of why this genocide and so on has been going on for so long. Um, Firstly, I think we must realize that this genocide in Gaza is part of a long series of genocide perpetrated by what we call the military industrial complex, which is basically a conglomeration of government officials, companies, and also even the military, especially in the US. So let me just begin by saying that in January 17th, 1961, the outgoing president of America, the late General Dwight Eisenhower, who was basically the U.S. Basically commander of the European forces battling Hitler. In his outgoing speech, he reminded the American public of the dangers of the what they call as the military industry complex, a conglomeration, as I mentioned before, conjunction of military people, the military establishment, the military companies, as well as politicians, by the way. Okay? In that, this conglomerate grew in strength, especially after World War II, and in the lead up to the Cold War. America began to spend a lot of money on defense. And these conglomerations, they become more and more powerful and more influential. Now, in his outgoing speech, the late president warned the American people of the danger of allowing these conglomerates to become too powerful, because he mentioned that, and I quote, it says that it endangers civil liberties and the democratic processes. Now, obviously, the uh, the military industry complex, they were involved in a lot of the wars that was prior to the 1967 war, the Korean War, and so forth. So and of course, the Jewish, what do you call it, the Jewish lobby, APEC, was first formed in 1954, by the way, for the interest of people. And they were the first name of APEC was basically the American Zionist Committee for Public Affairs. So this conjunction of the powerful military industry complex plus the Jewish lobby and the APEC, these are the main actors today behind not only the war, the genocide with respect to the Palestinians, but also with all other attempts for regime change institutionalized by the American government all over the world. All over the world. Because why? Because supporting this regime change through wars basically empowers and also enriches these conglomerations. And if you see, for example, even before Gaza in South Africa, for example, it took a long time to dismantle apartheid because the Americans, the British, and so on, they all supported South Africa, both from military, in terms of finance, infrastructure building, and so on and so forth. So Gaza is basically the latest example of this military objective of basically attaining world supremacy and also to destroy and also to basically create the dominant effect over the countries which they regard as unfriendly. So coming back to this issue, what we see in Gaza is a continuation of these attempts by these industrial conglomerates in order to extend the hegemony over the whole world. And therefore, Israel, being, of course, the special partner of US, they enjoyed all these bounties. So when we talk about why these things happen, we are not just focusing on Gaza. Gaza is just one example. But this is basically an ongoing exercise in world domination and world control, which Dwight Eisenhower in 1961 has warned us. At that time, it was not clear. But now we can see how clearly this is manifested, not only in Gaza, but also when you talk about now what they are doing in Iran, the bombing of the nuclear reactors, the unprovoked assassination attempts on the leadership of Iran, and so on and so forth. They are now talking about regime change. So you can see how this conjunction of all the political, military, and also all the other corporates, they come in. Why? Because when you have trouble, people make profit. So I think this is what I just want to elaborate so that the viewers can see a broader context in terms of what we are discussing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Auladdin. Yes, indeed, as I read a report that says that Israel is spending about, or Israel together with America, they are spending 280 million USD per day to carry out the genocide. And you can imagine these are all spent on weapons and how much money these companies are making from this project of genocide. So they are not only committing genocide, they are making money for themselves at the same time. So maybe there's, as you rightly pointed out, one of the motives is basically to make more money for themselves. Anyway, to elaborate further, without further ado, I want to invite Cikgu Azmi, who is the chairman of MAPIM, the NGO which is responsible for some issues as well as issues of human rights all over the world. I think many Malaysians are very familiar with Cikgu Azmi. I don't need to introduce him to all of you. Go ahead, Cikgu Azmi, your comment, your reflection on this situation, tragic situation of decades of corporate complicity in the genocide or human rights abuse in Palestine. Go ahead, Cikgu Azmi. Cikgu Azmi, your microphone, please unmute your microphone first. Can't hear you, Cikgu Azmi. Cikgu Azmi, tak dengar. Your microphone is mute. You need somebody to unmute. Okay, go ahead.
No, sorry. Thank you again, Prof. Nazarine and everyone. I think the reflection has been quite clear now that when we talk about this complicity and the bigger question of why the whole world fears to stop Israel's, atrocities. We are talking about a system that has been established by the emergence of this so-called United Nations system. And that system, in fact, is the basic problem that we have today when it is essentially is paralyzed by this power of the five, or they call it the veto power. And thereby you would see the double standards happening on cases like what's happening in Gaza. Now, United Nations Security Council has been tasked with maintaining the global peace, so-called, and security. But because of this system, United States, for one, has vetoed over 45, as I recollect, 45 resolutions critical of Israel since 1972, and anything to do with in favor of or not in favor of Israel will be then vetoed. So what's happening in Gaza and then in the illegal settlements in the West Bank, and up until the demand for ceasefire, it doesn't seem to work. So I think we are in that situation where even the General Assembly will not be binding whatever a very overwhelming majority of supporting ceasefire and supporting favor of recognizing Palestine. It doesn't work. So we have now what we call the selective application of the international law. You talk about the Fourth Geneva Convention and the United Nations Resolution 242, 338, and whatnot. You would see that they are getting even much more space, even much more strength to partake this criminal act, and the US and the West has become the patronage of Israel. So all these companies that has emerged, the list of 50 or more than 50, that is directly in at least 8 sectors has been reported by the UN and Francisca Albanese, that these companies are working in all sectors that supports Israel, whether it's military or technology and AI, in the machinery, in the finance, in the insurance, the academia, in energy, you name it. I mean, all these sectors are the sectors that this company has positioned themselves, and they are directing most of their support to Israel. All the companies that we can read in the report. So I think what is most essential now is about, while we are trying to expose as much as we can all these corporates, and naming them and shaming them, we are still stuck with the reality that things are not changing on the ground. We do need to use this report as an instrument, as a tool for public campaign, but the vital energies that should be focused is on the governments around the world, because the government recognize them, the governments give them the protection as as an investment that is very important for the growth of the country and whatnot, and therefore in that way, most governments in the world are protecting these companies, these corporates, and just a blind eye to knowing that they are supporting Israel, they are doing this, but most governments seem to be tamed by these companies, because they have a card in the hand that if you pull out from your country, then you're done. So that's my first impression of what this report has told us about this situation. And I think after this, our discussion should then be directed on what we have to do to delink these companies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Osmi, for your comment on the current situation. Now we want to discuss the challenges of what we are going to do about it, right? Because some of these companies are very embedded in the economy of many countries, including Malaysia. In fact, Malaysia is trying its hardest to encourage some of these companies, some of these complicit companies like Amazon, Microsoft, NVIDIA. All these companies are all providing technological support to Israel. Boeing, we supply weapons. We are also encouraging Boeing to come here and to help us in developing our economy, as well as to develop our technology. So realistically, now that Francesca Albanese has exposed their complicity, what should the government do now, including the government of Malaysia? What should the Malaysian government do now with regard to Amazon Web Services, which is now bidding for contracts from the Malaysian government, right? Microsoft trying to build data centers here, etc. Tian Chuan.
I think first of all we should see how the Western country, especially United States, function, and also to take on issues of the economy and corporate culture. On one hand, our government, a lot of developing country, welcome them with open arms. But you can see, if any of the developing countries develop their own indigenous technology, like China, like India, when they're about to surplus the capacities of those countries, that those technology that controlled by US or by the West, and they have no qualm sanctioning those companies. when we turn around, we ourselves are still living in a very 60 or even before that is a very dependency mentality. We still adore technology coming from the superpower. We still think that they are more superior than us, and only with their presence can help our economy. I think we can easily prove, a lot of progressive political economists have proven that they are not coming here to help our development. In fact, they make us more dependent and more entrapped into their exploitative system. I think this is something that our population, Malaysian citizen, as well as government, must discard this mentality that only them can provide us progress, economic development, and economic growth. So I think there's no meaning for us to claim that we are independent from colonialism, independent that we fought so hard, and at the end, when we come to economy, we like no choice. We have to submit to their wills. So I think I would like to really call on Malaysian public as well as Malaysian government to be much more selective. I think it's a myth that it will hurt us if we start sanctioning those company that complicit. I think that's something that we have to get the public to understand. And also we have to call on our government, stop being so submissive to them. And I fully agree that let's not be obsessed on trying to get this so-called foreign development to come in, foreign direct development to come in to help our economy. It's time we, in this region, ASEAN, we have, almost more than half a billion's market size. You have other countries that within the so-called non-alliance bloc that we should be much more bold and courageous in developing our economic policies without being too dependent on them. That's why I fully call on to have more stringent economic sanction and restriction according to the reports that submitted by the Francisca's Albanese. So Malaysian should be taking the lead on that.
Thank you, Tan Chua. So you are saying we should be serious, take the report seriously. Companies that are complicit shouldn't be welcome. No business relation with them. I want to ask a follow-up question, not to Tan Chua. I want to go to Professor Awaludin, because the Malaysian government recently even said to Boeing, please come. We like you to come over here. But Boeing is the supplier of weapons to Israel now, right? So now, realistically speaking, Professor Awaludin, people say, if you don't want to buy Boeing planes or the big aircraft, what are the other alternatives? If you want to talk about the European supplier, Airbus, they are also, if you dig up the stories about Airbus, they may also be complicit as well. So if you want to go to China, the plane over there, are they as reputable as Boeing? Are we also going to be very worried about safety? So people say realistically speaking, we still need to do business with these American companies. Is that true, Professor Awaludin? What's your comment? Prof. Awaludin, microphone off, please. Unmute first. Unmute. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to address your question. The first question you asked: what should our governments do? Okay, and I think there are many levels of actions that the government can and must pursue. Let me begin from the top. I mean, first of all, the United Nations were formed after the Second World War in an attempt to bring some order to the world, what you call a New World Order. And they set up a structure, basically, that supposedly gives justice to the nations. But as we know, the whole United Nations structure is based on maintaining the hegemony of the Western companies or countries. And of course, Western companies that are under them actually enjoy the benefits. And that extends to social, cultural, the economic, the finance, and so on and so forth. So basically, the entire world is in this grip of Western hegemony. Now, many countries, I understand, are unhappy with this situation, and there are calls for the reformation of the United Nations. And I think one of the most important call, which I think Malaysia should go, is to seek the reformation of the United Nations, in which countries can hold the entire world at ransom through their votes. Okay, because they have the votes to negate any sort of resolution. So that is basically one aspect that Malaysia as a country, and there are many countries that can work together in this nature. Because why? If we allow this situation to occur, and what we can see is the United States, for example, use the excuse in what do you call it in the war with Serbia, okay? They call it genocide of the Muslims in Serbia, to come in and use it as a pretext to overthrow the government of Serbia. Yeah. And yet, when we see the same situation in Gaza, okay, they chose to ignore the facts on the ground. And not only they turned a blind eye to Israel's clear transgression, but they also supported it through supplying of weapons and so on. So these are issues that the Malaysian government must play an important role in the international arena. And I think this must be done without fear or favor. The second aspect is to see that Malaysia needs to trade. Malaysia needs investments, and Malaysia needs technology in order to advance as a country. Now, the problem that I see is that the South, yeah, the developed South and so on, and we are present. We see the American technologies, especially as things that is number one in the terms of our priority list. Whereas if we look now, there are alternatives. And for example, with the rise of BRICS, the rise of China and so on, there are existing technologies there that actually can be as good, if not better. So I think we must not just close an eye and just follow the old narrative that the West is the best. The best is not only in terms of cost, not only in terms of performance, but also in terms of the ethical issues. The West has long used technology, with all the attached strings, to force countries to submit to their will. And therefore, in terms of choosing technology, we must also use the new narrative that we should not be subject to any of these strings that call us to keep a blind eye to the existing injustice happening in the world, including Gaza. So that's why I think we need to, of course, apply our policies judiciously. But the important point is that there must be some very strong ethical considerations. Money alone, profits alone, should not be the narrative today. If we are going to save not only the Palestinians, but to save humanity. Because humanity without ethical values is no longer humane and will tolerate all sorts of injustices, as we have seen happening today. Thank you.
Thank you, Gua. Can I ask Cikgu Azmi to follow up on this? Just to describe further, we have companies like Amazon, Web Services, which is apparently already getting a contract with one local university already. And Amazon Web Services is notorious in, I don't know whether you have heard of the Nimbus project, where they supply, they work together with the Israel military to gather information and artificial intelligence, etc., to help the genocide in Gaza. Cikgu Azmi, your comment?
Yes, that's right. We always been bogged down with this issue. Do we have an alternative? Can we, trying to get other things not dependent on the West? It is ideally, we are calling for people to always consider, you put ethics first and profit later, but it's not easy said than done. And the alternative is there, but is it a true alternative because we are embedded, as you said just now? When we talk about Airbus, with civil aviation, which is not linked to the Israel war crimes. We have Embraer of Brazil, we have Comac of China, we have TUSAS of Turkey, we have the Turkish Aerospace and Pakistan Aeronautical Complex. All that is there. But the thing is that while it's not as simple as just saying that we're going to stop and that's it, I think the whole process has been, very much tied down with many procedures because we have been embracing this, as Peter was saying just now, this capitalism. They have, they have control the finance, they have control the banks, they have control. So all this will be a very complex thing to shift away from. But we have to call for, really courageously, as Tian Chua was saying, that with BRICS coming in as, another move, is going to break down what is happening now with what we are seeing in the world trade. I think there is an opportunity, there's a room, there's a window that we have to explore. Getting the South to organize themselves, now we call it the Global South. But within that, you have groupings like the NAM, and then we have now even the new development bank, they call it. And now we have ASEAN as also a strength. But it can be an academic discussion unless and until governments and leaders of government are courageous enough to make that shift, to make a bold decision. Okay, we end the Boeing in such and such time. We're going to then deal with the other sources. If that is done, then that's good enough for us. But other things, we have to look into our whole wide range of security. We are trying to grapple with food security. We're trying to grapple with the health system, which is still dependent on the West. We have not even developed a good infrastructure for digital security because they are surveilling us. They know where we are. They are listening to us. They are marking us. They are, they are doing this. So it's something that is very challenging for us. But my comment is that we do not have a choice. If we are really with the principle and ethical values that we hold very dearly, then we have to make that difficult choice. But again, experts like yourself as economists, and we have so many things. I'm going to organize what we call the Muslim Scientists Conference end of this year, trying to get people with the best ideas and how we can develop our own strength in economics and the whole system. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Cikgu Azmi. Peter, what's your comment about how are we going to be, how are we going to detach ourselves from these corporate conglomerates which are very embedded in many countries, especially Malaysia? Go ahead, Peter.
That's too big a question. We have to, really, that's so optimistic. I'm only half serious, but we have to end capitalism. That's not a realistic option in the near future. But within that, the difficulties are, as other speakers have pointed out. And I agree, of course, that there's an overriding ethical imperative for us to behave properly. But it's not new that ethics doesn't take priority over the interests that governments and corporations have. The whole world is a proof that ethics really doesn't count when it comes to the interests of the capitalist and governments. So, realistically speaking, we can't be optimistic that that will make a difference. One example occurs to me from what previous speakers have said. In Australia, we're seeing an interesting tension at the moment. It's clear that the United States is the major force that's driving and maintaining the crimes, the atrocities in Gaza by supporting Israel uncritically at the moment. But what's interesting is that Australia has been going along with that, and but in some sort of ambivalent way. The government is now, for example, our Prime Minister is now in China. And although we have committed ourselves up to our ears to the American alliance, we've swapped from French submarines to American submarines, which we'll probably never see. We're just paying for them. But the tension is that we see that our commercial interests and other interests are perhaps as much with China as anybody else. And that may help us, as previous speakers were saying, to wean ourselves from this uncritical alliance, especially because the discussion now is if America decides to force a war over Taiwan, for example, what do we do in Australia? We see that we have very deep economic dependence on China. And so this is a moral and political dilemma, which is a good one in a sense, because it's forcing us to rethink uncritical support for the American alliance, which is not helping anyone. Again, I think we have to not be too optimistic that ethical concerns will force governments to change their attitudes. Our government has been disgraceful. I was going to say that one of the differences, to show the difficulty, after all, Malaysia has a different attitude towards Palestine, generally speaking. You have an admirable, broad support and the success of your centre and the boycott movement. And so even there, from what you're saying, the Malaysian government is still tying itself up in corporate commitments. Imagine how much worse it is in Australia, where we don't have the kind of moral and political and ethical commitment to justice for Palestine. So how much worse it is here, where we don't have a head start as you do. And even in your case, as you were saying, this is a difficulty. So the obstacles are great. I just go back to the only solution I can think of is examples around the world where popular uprising within the framework. I mean, it doesn't have to be revolution, but I'm thinking of years ago in Ireland, popular rising on the boycott ended up changing the government and its policy towards South Africa. That's a very good model for how we may hope to strengthen our dissent and our resistance.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Peter, for your comments. I'm thinking about some other countries who are in between Australia and Malaysia, Indonesia, for example. Now, recently, news said that they have clinched a deal with Trump. Trump says that a very great agreement between America and Indonesia. But then what happened is you can see Indonesia is not willing to join the Hague Group, which 8 countries which are asking the world to obey international law with regard to Palestine. Indonesia is not willing to join the Hague Group, which is very sad. Maybe because of being worried about their future relation with America. That could be the reason behind it all. And that shows how challenging it is for governments anyway. So we're going to go to our last and third round. I'm going to go and ask Cikgu Azmi first to start off with, which is Cikgu Azmi, we have been involved in many campaigns to convince the government to stop, for example, in the case of Caterpillar, right? We have protested in front of the PNB office saying that the Malaysian government should influence PNB and Sime Darby to stop its business relation with Caterpillar. But for so many years we have been doing this, and still they are not budging. They are continuing to do business with Caterpillar. No sign whatsoever, even write a letter to tell that Caterpillar to stop assisting the genocide in Gaza, despite Malaysia being in the Hague Group. So now, what's your advice to NGOs and to people of conscience in Malaysia, all over the world, in the light of the report by Francesca Albanese? What should we do next to make sure that the report by Francesca Albanese is not going to be just a useless report on the shelf and nothing is be done about it? Go ahead, Cikgu Azmi.
Yeah, okay. I'll just go very quickly on two things. We do have to continue working on the government level. You know, the first one is to I'm proposing that we should have an official identify and prohibit complicit companies. I've got this idea of, establish a Malaysian watch list on genocide-linked corporations, and then we just publicize it, in our website, and just put it on. Just let people know. They can debate, they agree, they won't agree, but we have what we call the Malaysian watch list on this genocide-linked corporations. And then what do we do that with the blacklist? We can enforce the blacklisting and procurement bans. For instance, we are calling for the Malaysian government, ministries, JLCs, and public universities, from procuring products or services from listed companies. We can call for a hosting of partnerships, conferences on investment involving such entities. And the last one that I may also to round up of what we can do at the government level is to pass a domestic law against businesses with apartheid entities. Now that would be very interesting. I mean, Malaysia has also endorsed that report that was published. But let's do it, in a way that the government is doing a very serious move where we have a law, domestic law. What do we do with that? We criminalize Malaysian corporate or financial ties with those kind of entities. It's going to be very challenging, but I'm calling for that. The last part of my rounding up is what do the civil society level do? There is something that's called shareholder activism. Let's educate shareholders that are somewhat related to all the companies, to reach out to them that they should pull out. And then that will be a strong call. And of course, the public pressure campaigns against technology and arms firm has to move more and more pressure. And I think there's one thing that it's called the Alien Tort Claims Act. Lawsuits. These are kind of lawsuits that public can do. There is a OECD guidelines, complaint mechanism, they call it. So if we sort of orientate our public to take this kind of thing, a group action at the legal level, I think that will sort of provoke, and also you build up a movement of people against these companies. I think that can be done practically. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cik Azim. Maybe I got pencarum, depositors for depositors, PNB, Amaran Saham Nasional, they can pressure PNB to put pressure on Sam Darby to stop doing business with Caterpillar. That could be one example. Anyway, Professor Awaludin, comment on the issue.
Thank you. Let me just begin by saying that I perused some data this morning. And from what I can see, a list of about maybe 20 countries. The pendulum of public opinion has changed. In fact, for all these major countries, and of course, among them are the Western countries that are complicit in the genocide, we find that the majority of the public do not support Israel, okay, or have an unfavorable opinion about Israel. Now, this, I think, it was not the case 2 years before. So I believe that through mass global public action, of which NGOs like us must basically participate, we can affect that change. It may not happen immediately in the future, but it's certainly going to make a difference to the order. Yes, corporates or corporations do not factor in ethical considerations, okay, until they see that this can lead to either enhanced profits or decrease in profits. So that's why the public has to be educated to see the evils, and then they themselves, through their public actions and through their MPs and so on, they will make change. I believe that is the way ahead, but it will take time. But we must not stop. Okay. In Malaysia, I think I was participating with you in the protest against Caterpillar and so on. There is no excuse for Sime Darby to continue to support and to be, having a major shareholding about Caterpillar in Malaysia. Not when the weight of government, public opinion are against any involvement in corporations that are involved directly in the genocide. And Caterpillar has been involved in the genocidal actions against the president since 1948. It is not new. So therefore, I think as NGOs, we must go to our politicians and we must demand that this action be taken to stop at least some of the major complicit organizations, because we don't lose anything by divesting from Caterpillar. And this is in line with what the global public sentiment is. So I believe that we should continue what we should be doing, but we must be exploring more efforts, for mass action against this, so that our government, not only our government, but also our corporations, speak the talk and walk the talk. So I think that this is the challenge for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Awaludin. Peter, I will come to the last thing. Peter, go ahead. Sorry, Peter, your microphone, please.
Thank you. I agree with everything that was said, of course, and the need for shareholder activism and popular activism is clearly important. Forgive me for making one more skeptical remark or caution about that. Let me give the example of the Iraq War. In Australia, almost the whole country were opposed, and enormous numbers went out in the streets demonstrating about Australia's involvement in the Iraq War that America ran. And it made no difference to the government. That's a sobering insight into the limitations of even very strong popular sentiment opposed to government policies. So we have to recognize that even as now, for example, now for over a year regarding Iraq, there have been very large demonstrations. Every week I attend them in the main cities and here in Sydney, and the government is not paying attention. So we have to be creative, perhaps, to think of how to turn that into effective pressure. And certainly the boycott movement is one. I think another thing is to make sure we have influence on the media, which for the most part have not been helpful, the corporate media. The mainstream journalists have been very, very poor in reporting accurately. The mainstream television stations in Australia have been very bad. So I think that can help shift things. There are signs that when things are as bad as they are, there may be a shift. I'm trying to be a little bit realistic about the obstacles. And so we have to do all the things that we've discussed. And in the end, it is popular sentiment that, as I've said earlier, it turned the tide in Vietnam and elsewhere. And in the end, the boycott movement can be very effective. There are good examples of where in Israel-Palestine, boycotts made a difference to the viability of different corporations. And so I haven't got anything new to say, but just to indicate the obstacles that we're obviously facing.
Thank you, Peter. So you emphasize the importance of the boycott movement. We in Malaysia are engaged in that, but some Malaysians are now also feeling very tired of boycotts. They think burgers are more important than the genocide in Gaza. So Kianjua, what do you think about that? What is your reflection about this?
I think generally we have a consensus about we need to have stronger public education. And myself being politician before, one of the greatest motivation, or either you call it incentive or deterrent, is that votes, right? I mean, in the situation where politics become a lot more polarized, every vote counts. right? So the public education that can be turned into effective electoral impact will, I won't say we are not going to defeat capitalism as a whole. We are not going to stop the economy of genocide as a whole, but it can be successfully take action to a certain corporation, as an example, and also as a small toffee on ourselves. And this, I think this is opportunity for us to exercise that. And again, as we said, there's quite a number of consumer alternative that available and make the choices slightly more easy. I think the key that where civil society and activist groups must stress is that we have to create strong public opinion, and we have to create conscientious consumer. So I think this is not an easy task, but as we see in many other examples, quite a lot of corporations, they are also sensitive about profits. A lot of politicians are also sensitive about votes. You may not change the whole government, but you got one or two politicians who think that if they don't take this out, they're going to lose their seats. So these are they can be the spokesperson. So I think, I mean, maybe in a discussion like this, we are a bit broader, but I think we should be more strategized. One thing I want to stress is that even though BDS is a global movement, I think we still need to step up our international solidarity action. In my experience, when we deal with labor rights, it is very that type of mobilization when someone in Vietnam was dismissed without due process. Then suddenly you got union from Indonesia, union from what's it called, Malaysia and Germany simultaneously write to their HQ and say, look, if you do this, we are going to sanction you, and we're going to create boycott campaigns to boycott your shoes or your product. Small victory like that happened. It was somewhat, I won't say totally successful. It has certain gain. And I think maybe something that start working on that to have some sort of simultaneous action on one or two things. So that will may result some result. Lastly, I think I got some inspiration from what Cikgu Asmi said about corporates intervention. In the past, we did that, but this maybe contradict a bit to the BDS motive. What's it called? Call is that you get one or two shareholder to buy their share and to go to the shareholder meeting waving your Palestinian flags and creating havoc and calling the boards to be accountable of the business as usual board meeting may also be something that we can consider. Maybe for PMB or for Caterpillar, since it is a public company, we might get one or two shareholder, or maybe BDS can buy one share in it. And then when the shareholder meetings come up, you can use this as part of the activist mobilization. So I mean, some of these creative ideas can be utilized in order to create public awareness. It may not stop the genocide, it may not terminate the occupation, but to some extent, it will move forwards towards creating a stronger public awareness, and that is what the government fear the most. And they have to be, for them to stay in power, they must be even more sensitive about public. Thank you.
Thank you, Tianjor. I'm very touched by optimism of all the panelists. everybody says it's very challenging, but at the same time, people say we shouldn't give up. We must step up. So that is the spirit that we must have. We must not lose faith in the power of the truth and justice, right? We have learned our lesson from what happened in South Africa, right? Last time, South Africa's apartheid regime was defeated eventually because of popular resistance against or opposition against injustice in South Africa. And we must also be aware of the latest trend in New York. We saw the victory by Zohran Mamdani, who was very explicit in his stance against the genocide in Gaza, saying that he even say he wants to arrest Netanyahu if he goes to New York, and still he won the nomination. Of course, he hasn't won he's not the mayor yet, but we'll see what's going to happen. But his popularity is picking up apparently over there in the US. Therefore, I think the picture is very, very positive as far as the trend against the genocide in Gaza and against Zionism in general. So I think even though we mentioned challenging, things are not easy, but actually, globally speaking, the forces, the opposition towards Zionism and towards the injustice in Palestine is getting stronger and stronger. So we must not give up. Thank you to our panelists, all of you, for your kind willingness to participate in this webinar and to share your opinions and reflections on the issue. And hopefully, inshallah, victory for Palestine will be very soon. Free Palestine and genocide. Thank you very much to everyone. Bye-bye.